If you want a strategy for consistently winning higher value clients from networking events, then keep watching. In this video, I'm going to break down the 3 key strategies that have allowed myself and my clients to consistently generate work and get high value clients by just going to networking events. So maybe you've tried this before, and as a creative, I know that there's a lot of people who identify as introverts out there. And maybe the thought of networking events just make you a little bit uncomfortable. Now, if that's the case, then what I can assure you is these strategies will still work for you, because I'm going to teach you how to do this in a way that doesn't feel salesy, doesn't feel spammy, and doesn't feel like you're some kind of robot. So this is something that can allow you to do this in a way that feels authentic to you and have something in your back pocket where you feel confident walking in that room, knowing that you can introduce yourself to anybody and actually get them interested in what you do. Before I talk about the actual frameworks, I want to talk about a couple of big ideas and some assumptions and mistakes that I see people making when they're going to networking events. The first big idea, or the first mistake, is that people think the networking events are about them and their business. And so they go there worrying that they have to have the perfect introduction, the perfect pitch, and they have to know exactly what to say. And when they meet people, they're only going to get one shot to introduce themselves or one shot to make that connection. And what happens is that kind of tends to make people come across in a little bit of an unnatural way. And it also means that people are very focused on themselves, which actually turns other people off, because really, we all know that the best way to make friends and influence people is to make that person feel like the most important person in the room. And I think it was Simon Cowell that actually said that originally. And obviously the book How to Win Friends and Influence People talks about this a lot. But the biggest mistake is thinking that networking is about us and having to have the perfect introduction and the perfect pitch. Now, I'm going to talk you through a pitch framework that will allow you to just relax and kind of forget about the whole pitch and just have something in the back of your mind, a process to follow, a way to introduce yourself that makes you stand out from everybody else, but also that clearly articulates what you do so that that person can actually introduce you to relevant people and relevant contacts. So the first big idea is that it's not actually about you, it's about the people that you're going to that networking event with. The second big idea is that we're not actually there to sell anything, or we're not actually there to prove anything to anybody. We should spend most of the time at that networking event listening to other people and then offering value for free where we see fit. So we want to actually be, our mission when we go to a networking event should be to actually be the most valuable person in that room. We want everyone being like, oh my God, I had such an interesting conversation with Matt and he gave me this, or you should meet Matt, or you should go and have a conversation with Matt. Like, that's kind of what we want people saying. And the way that we get that is not by focusing on ourselves and talking about us, it's actually by focusing on the other person. So I'm going to talk about 3 things. Number 1, how to introduce yourself at a networking event so that people remember you, and you can do it in a way that doesn't feel canned or like some kind of elevator pitch. Number 2, what questions to ask in order to identify the most valuable things and the most valuable opportunities. And then number 3, how do you follow up with the people that you've met and not lose those connections, actually capitalize on those people and turn the right people into clients and build the right relationships. They're the 3 things that we're going to talk about, the 3 strategies. So let's dive in. Now, I've labeled this pitch because this is how most people talk about it. They talk about the elevator pitch or how you introduce yourself. And I find the problem with most of these is people are trying to remember a specific way or a specific script to introduce themselves. And what that ends up doing is making it feel very unnatural. And I've done this. Like, I was part of a business accelerator program many years ago where every single week we had to stand up in front of the room of about 50 people and we had to pitch our business, and we only had 60 seconds. It was a 60-second pitch. And what I found was, although the people who really worked on this pitch word for word nailed it and everyone gave them an applause, and sometimes they won, the best pitch award or whatever, the people who actually built the most authentic relationships and the people who actually succeeded the most in that business accelerator were always the ones who talked about their business in a natural way, in a way that was easy to understand, in a way that didn't feel like it was rehearsed, and in a way that related directly to the people listening. And so the best framework and the best formula that I've found for this is in 4 parts. And this is something that I came up with that I use whenever I introduce myself to someone. So the first thing that I say usually, or the first thing I want to really make sure I convey well, is who we actually help. Who do we work with? And I've put here specific. We don't want to be general, like we help small businesses, because that doesn't really help me. If I find you really interesting, I want to introduce you to someone, I'm not going to be like, hey, you should meet Joe. He works for small business owners, because that's going to be like 90% of the people in the room. And it's actually about 90% of businesses, both in the UK and the US and in most economies, right? 80 to 90% of businesses are what we would call small businesses. So we want to try and be as specific as possible. In our case, we talk about creative studios. We say we help creative studios. And the reason that we use that term is because it's a specific term that tends to resonate with a certain size agency. So when we used to say we work with agencies, we would get founders coming to us who would have teams of, 50 people, and we'd have founders coming to us, just them and their business partner. So we were like, we need to find something to really clarify who are the people that we work with. So we use creative studios. We help creative studios. What do we do? Well, we help them to master the business of creativity, right? Okay, how do we do that? Well, there's kind of 3 parts to what we do. There's the systems part, which is really around the implementation. There's the strategy part, which is really around what you do. And there's the support part, which is really where the coaching comes in. Why do we do it? Because we believe that when people master the business of creativity, they get to do their life's most important work. Now, I'm not saying that every time I introduce myself, I'm like, hey, I'm Matt. We help creative studios to master the business of creativity using our 3-step system so that they can do their life's best work. Because that sounds a little bit canned, right? What I'm doing is I'm compartmentalizing those 4 things, and I can introduce them at any point, and I can frame the conversation at any point around those 4 things, but it allows me to have a base, a concept. So rather when someone asks me what I do, I'm like, oh, I'm a business coach. It's kind of a little bit vague. It doesn't really help you to know what I really do, because like business coaching is just a label. Business coaching is just a skill. It's not really what we do, right? What we do is we help creative studios to master the business of creativity. That's what we actually do. That's the process that we take people through. So for you, whether you've got like a design studio, an animation studio, a film studio, whatever it is, you can say, hey, I run a film studio. But if you said, for example, like what we specialize in is helping tech founders to explain their products in a way that anybody can understand. Like that is way more powerful than, hey, we run a film studio. So if you talk directly to your clients, then the best thing about that is that people can then introduce you to somebody, and you can test this for yourself. You can go to a networking event and you can say, we help business owners, or we run a design studio, i.e. super focused on us, versus we help these people. And notice when you say we help these people, if you say that to enough people, then what you'll start to get is people saying to you, oh, I need to introduce you to so-and-so, because they think of somebody who meets that criteria. And that's the key, right? We want to be able to identify the who so that other people who aren't necessarily going to become clients are able to introduce us to those types of people, right? Second thing is the what. And now this is usually framed around a problem or a promise. So we help people to get more of this thing or overcome this specific challenge. And so you can think of this as like a vitamin or a painkiller. So we help people to get in better shape, or we help people to lose body fat, right? It's a pain or it's a desire. Then the how. Well, how do you actually do that? Have you got a system? Have you got a process? You might just say, if we're using the film example, You might say, you know, we help B2B SaaS founders to take really complex ideas or to simplify their products so that anybody can understand using the power of story and film, or using the power of animation. That's how we do it. And then the why bit is slightly harder. It's something that maybe you need a little bit of time to think about. Why do you do that? And when I ask people sometimes in the creative world, they're like, because we love animation or we love film. Absolutely fine. But if you can make that why something that's a little bit bigger than you, and most importantly relates to your ideal clients, you will find you'll have a lot more power. So we talk about people doing their life's most important work because that's what we hear from creatives. They want to do things that have impact. They want to do things that are important. They want to do things that leave a legacy and that they're proud of, right? So we call that the life's most important work. So this is just a framework. And I'll give you another example of how I might use this when I introduce myself. So if somebody says to me, hey, Matt, what do you do? I might not start with the who. I might not start saying, well, we work with creative studios. I might say something like, well, you know how creatives are usually really good at the creating, the making stuff, but they're usually not as good at the marketing themselves and running the business. And the majority of people will know that, right? They'll know somebody who is an artist or runs their own business and is really talented, but they're just not great at marketing themselves, because that's quite a common challenge. I say, well, we help them to do that. We help them to market themselves. We help them to master the business of creativity so they can attract higher value clients, so they can do more of the work they really love and get paid what they are worth. So I will interchange those things, but I'm always thinking who, right? Who do we help? What do we help them with, and how? I might not even talk about the why, but if that comes up in conversation, I've got that box as well. And people usually say to me, oh, that's really interesting. How did you get into that? Right? And so then I can kind of tell them a story. But this brings me to my second point, which is about the majority of your time should be spent on the person you're talking to, not on yourself. You can tell people a bit about how you started, but what I would encourage you to do is say, hey, I can tell you that. It's a little bit of a long story and I'd love to connect with you again sometime over a coffee. If you're interested, then we can talk about that. But tell me a little bit more about you. And the reason we do that is because when we go to a networking event, from my perspective, I'm in information gathering mode. I want to find out as much about the people who are there as possible, because that information is way more valuable to me. I can reach out and tell my story to somebody, or I can reach out and connect with that person and tell them more about me at a later date. What I want to do is try and find about as much information from them as possible. So that brings me on to section number 2, which is the questions that we ask. Now, I've taken these 4 from a book called Spin Selling by Neil Rackham. And you don't have to ask these in a particular way, but there's usually 4 types of question that we want to ask someone in order to position ourselves for the final part of the strategy, which is giving some value. The first is we want to know their situation. So who do they work for right now? What is their position? Who do they help? All of that kind of stuff, right? We want to try and limit the number of situational questions, because there was a study that showed that situational questions are ones that people find a little bit more boring. And you probably had this experience yourself if you've gone to a networking event, or if you've traveled a lot and you get to that point, oh, hey, my name's Matt, and I grew up in England and now I live here and this is what I do. You get a little bit bored of telling people that. So we want to try and spend the least amount of time on the situational questions as possible. Then I think in my head about positives and negatives. So right here we've got problem. Okay, and this is literally the spin selling formula. So situation, problem, impact, need. But what I see happening a lot is when people have this in their mind, they will meet someone and say, hey, nice to meet you, Jay. They tell me a little bit about what you do. Oh, amazing. And so what's your biggest problem right now? And that's kind of quite aggressive, and it's a little bit like going to a dinner party and asking someone how often do they have sex and what's their sex life like, and how much money have they got in their bank right now. It's quite a personal question, and to somebody that doesn't necessarily know you, that's probably not a question they're going to answer in a really kind of honest and open way, because we usually don't open up about our problems to strangers. So what I would actually start with is the positive. So rather than the problem, I would say, like, what's the positive? So situation, positive. We can then go negative. So, hey Joe, what do you love the most about your role in this company? What do you love the most about working in the industry, working with these people? What are some goals you've got for this year? What are some things that you're excited about? Right? So you're talking about the towards, the things that get people excited, the things that people are proud of. Most people will talk to almost anyone about that because it makes us feel good. It's a towards motion rather than an away from motion. And so you're much more likely to get a decent answer from people about that. Now, the beauty of starting with the positive is that then frames you for the negative. So it's very easy to start with, what do you love about this? And then go to, and just out of curiosity, what frustrates you the most about this? So that's much easier in the context of positivity because they've already told you all the things that they love. And I'm just curious, like, what's your biggest challenge in your role right now? What are some things that frustrate you day to day? And so the reason we're getting this information is it's going to be really valuable for the final part, the third part of this strategy. So we're really trying to get into that person's world. What's going on? What's their situation? And what are the things that they love? What are the things that they want more of? And what are the things that frustrate them? Okay. Now, you're probably not going to talk about the impact that has in a deep way at a networking conversation for a few reasons. Number one, you might not have time. Number two, there might be other people there in that room where it's like they don't want to open up too much about this, but it's still useful to have this in the back of your mind, right? And so impact is really about getting people to that next level, that next tier. So let's say that you meet Joe and he's the marketing manager of a startup. And right now, the thing he loves about his role is that it's dynamic and no day's the same. And he loves working with a small team and he loves being at the cutting edge of the industry. And the things that really frustrate him is like always having to find funding and always having a really tight marketing budget. And he's the only one in the team right now that really drives the marketing. You might say, yeah, I can imagine that's really hard. Like, what's the impact of that for you day to day? Like, how does that make you feel? And so we're really just trying to get the next level of pain here for someone or frustration for someone, because people will often laugh and just say, oh, it's annoying, I've got to manage a team. Okay, well, what's the impact of that? What does that really mean for you? It's like, well, it's quite stressful because I actually feel that like the weight of everything is on my shoulders, and that can be quite stressful at times. Right? And if you get people to open up about this stuff, it's gold, because if you talk to your ideal clients, or even somebody who's maybe not your perfect ideal client, but is within your industry, you start to get these kind of deeper pains and these things that frustrate people, and you can use them in your marketing, and you can use them in the third part, which I'm going to share with you in a minute. So that's kind of the impact. Then finally, and I love these kind of questions because they're so revealing, what do you need right now? What do you feel you need right now? And so some of the questions and some examples of questions that I might ask people are things like, well, if you just had a magic wand and you could fix a bunch of stuff, like what's the first thing that you would fix, right? Or if you had the perfect solution to these things right now, like what would that look like? And what you're trying to get to is what people believe that they need. What's their best thinking around how to solve some of these challenges and problems? Now, look, what I will say is this is just a guide. I would really encourage you as a core skill in your business to really master the art of questions and asking good questions to reveal the kind of things that you want to find out about people, because they are one of the most powerful tools that you can have in your business. The ability to ask the right questions, the ability to extract the right information is one of the most valuable skills that you can learn. So this is a guide. Again, I'll have this in the back of my head. Where are you now? Where are you trying to get to? What are some of the things that are standing in the way? What are some of the impacts of those things? And what do you feel you need right now? Like, what would you love to happen? Because that really tells me what's going on in the mind of my prospect. Now, obviously, what you can do if you're being very ruthless with this and you're going to a networking event that say it's an hour and you really want to make sure you connect with some ideal clients, is when you talk about situation and they say, hey, I'm the marketing director of a steelworks and we do something that feels totally irrelevant to you and you're never going to work with this person. You go, cool. You just don't follow up on those questions. You're like, oh, nice to meet you, man. That sounds really interesting. Cool. I'm just going to go and grab a drink, or, it was nice to meet you. I'm going to go and talk to some other people right now. And so you're just trying to find people. And when you hear someone who's your ideal client, hey, so what are you up to? What do you do? I work for this company. Oh, cool. What about you? Oh, we actually work with clients a little bit similar to you. We work with do you mind if I just pick your brains on some stuff? I love having these conversations with people because it gives me so many ideas about how we can improve our offer and how we can make things better. I'm just curious, like, what do you love about your role right now? So that's kind of how I would treat it. And honestly, this formula, this framework works really well. So just to recap, here's what we're talking about. The first thing is you need to have a structure in the back of your mind for how you introduce yourself. I've called it the pitch, but to be honest, I don't really like this word. I'm going to move it to introduction. How do you introduce yourself to people? Okay, so who do you help? Who do you work with? What do you help them to do? What's the result, the problem, or the pain point you help them overcome? How do you do it? Roughly, we don't need to know the steps. We don't need to be like, we get the camera, we turn it on, we go to the location, we shoot in this aperture. We don't need to know any of that stuff. Just high level, like through film, through animation, through design, whatever it is, right? How do we do it? Why? What's your mission? What are you up to in the world? This thing is often compelling. So that's the first thing. Have that in the back of your head. Then you really want a framework for the questions. Figure out what people are currently facing in terms of pains, in terms of desires, in terms of frustrations. What kind of impact is that having on them? And what do they feel they need right now? Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking right now is, are people really going to tell me this? Well, if you listen and you are genuinely curious because you're doing this for the right reasons, i.e. you genuinely want to see if there's anyone you can help, not, oh, I'm asking someone this question so I can set them up and insert my product, then people will tell you. If you are present, in fact, I created an acronym, and this is going a little bit off on a tangent, but before I tell you the last thing, I'm just going to add this thing in. This is something I created a while ago, and it's a great acronym that I remind myself of when I go to networking events. Okay. So the first thing is I want to be present. I want to be present with that person. Okay. If I'm not present, if I'm in my head thinking about loads of other things and thinking about how I'm going to introduce myself, that will come off and people will get that you're not really listening. The second thing, or actually I'll jump to the last thing because this is as important, is I want to be curious. So I'm present, right? I'm actually curious about what is this person doing and what are they up to? And I'm not trying to lead the conversation anywhere. I'm just being genuinely curious. So that's the second thing. And I kind of think that they should be actually in that order rather than the other order. But that's the second thing. And then the third thing is agenda. Right? We want to remove the agenda because people go into conversations oftentimes with an agenda. Like, I want to push this thing. So we want to be present with people. We want to remove the agenda and we want to be genuinely curious. And that's something I keep in the back of my mind when I'm interacting with people. But anyway, back to the final part. So, as I said, there were 3 parts. The first part is how you introduce yourself. The second part is the questions that you ask. And then the third and final part, which most people really fall down on, is the follow-up. Okay? They go to a networking event, they meet loads of cool people, and they're like, oh, it was amazing to talk to you. And then they just don't follow up. They either forget or they just drop them a message being like, hey, it was nice to meet you. And there's no kind of thread there. There's no like continuation. And that person might say, yeah, it was great to meet you too. And then that's where the conversation ends. You don't really know where to go next with that. Well, with this framework, we've kind of solved that, because we will have some information. And this is the crucial part to the questions, is that we've got some information about people. Now, if you can't remember this, I would honestly make a note, like on my phone or somewhere. Once I finish talking to someone, I would make a note about that person, some things that I found. And even if it's just a quick voice note to yourself or whatever, or just some quick scribbles on a bit of paper, because then what happens when you follow up is this is how you structure the message, is you remind them of, hey, we met at this event. So be like, hey, Joe, we met at this networking event last week. I loved how you ... or I love how your business does this, or I love how your mission is this, or I love how you work with these people. It's really cool. You mentioned, this is the cool part, right? You mentioned that you had this desire or this challenge. I have got this thing that might help you get some clarity around this. Or would you be interested in jumping on a quick call where I can talk to you about how I might be able to help with some of these things? Right? And so it's specific. Rather than, hey, I just met you, it's like we've now got information about them and their business and what they do and the things that they need right now. Now, this might be, and I've done this several times in the past, this might be as simple as introducing them to somebody. So the big message here, what I really want to get across is that when you go to networking, it's about creating meaningful connections with people. Because oftentimes some of my best clients have come from a referral from somebody else who will never be a client because they're just not people that we work with. But because I've taken a genuine interest, I've delivered value, and I've remembered specific things about them, they like me enough and they trust me enough to introduce me to somebody else. So if we go back to this concept, it's like, hey, Joe, I met you at this event. I really love how you do this. I remember you saying that right now this is a frustration or a pain, or I remember you saying that this is what you want more of this year. Would it be useful if I introduce you to someone in my network that can help with these things? Or even if they're a prospect, right? This is how simple it can get. If they're a prospect, I would love to send you one of my favorite books on this topic. What's your address? And honestly, if you did this every single month, if you went to a networking event every single month with this strategy and you clearly described what you do to people, you listened actively and asked the right questions, and then you followed up with people and delivered value and just gave them something like a free call, a PDF that you've written, a book that you've read, an introduction to their network, and you expected nothing in return, your business would double in the next 90 days. And that sounds like a big promise, but I guarantee that this is something that either you're not doing correctly, if that's not the case, or consistently. Because going once and making a couple of contacts is great, but doing that consistently and finding the right networking events to go to, whether they're conferences, whether they're small kind of intimate events, doesn't matter. The thing that matters is you're talking to the right people, you're listening actively, and then you're finding ways to demonstrate value and deliver things up front. In fact, I've had this pulled on me so many times. One of my very first life coaches that I hired was as simple as this. I met him at a networking event. He asked me what I did. He told me what. He said, I coach high-performing men to help them run the business that they were born to run, or something like that. I don't remember exactly what his pitch was, but it was like related to me. Okay, it was like, I coach high-performing men that run their own business. Let's just say it was that. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And that's pretty much all he said about himself. The rest of the time he spent talking about me and just asking questions. And I'm curious, what was the most frustrating thing about that? And, oh, have you done this in the past? Or have you worked with this person in the past, or have you done this, or have you done that? And then at the end of the session, he said, it was really nice to meet you. I'd love to stay in touch. The next day he followed up with me and he was like, hey, Matt, we were talking about that thing and you said that, you were struggling with whatever it was at the time. I'd love to send you a book. And he sent me a book in the post and he just signed the front of it. And he said, read this book. It will be game changing for you. And it was. And after that, I actually reached out to him and I said, can you tell me a little bit more about how you help people? That's the power of really listening, of delivering value and being specific. He didn't just say, hey, this is the same book that I sent to everybody. It was a book specifically based on that conversation. And I probably spent over $5,000 with him as a life coach. And that book probably cost him £10. So I know this works because it's been used on me multiple times and I've used it on people multiple times and my clients use it multiple times. So if you can do this consistently, this honestly is one of the most powerful ways to get clients consistently, to get the right kind of clients consistently, and also to have everybody else talking about you in a positive way, because you're not there to sell anything, you're not pitching people, you're listening, and then you're delivering value. And that is the ultimate networking formula. If you found this video useful and helpful, all I would ask is that you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below if you've got any questions. I read all of the comments. So if you've tried this or you've got any questions about this particular strategy, drop them below and I will do my best to answer them. My name is Matt Essam. We help creatives, studios to master the business of creativity so they can do their life's most important work. I'll see you in another video soon. I hope you found that video valuable. Now, if you're anything like me, you might still be feeling a little bit overwhelmed. There is so much information out there. It's quite difficult to know what things apply to us and, more importantly, what things to implement first. That's why I've created the Agency Roadmap. It's a piece of software that learns about your business and creates a custom strategy based on your specific situation. All you have to do is answer 25 questions, and using thousands of data points from agencies that we've successfully helped to scale, it will show you exactly what you need to work on right now to grow your business. You'll also receive a free copy of my best-selling book, and you'll know exactly what chapters in here are most relevant for you. So if you want to stop guessing and be confident that you're actually working on the right things, just click the link below and get a custom roadmap for growing your agency.